Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our program. So it's just a continuation on what is economy. So today we're going to look at the difference between the economic growth and economical development. They look the same, they sound the same, economical growth and economical development. First of all, we're going to look at the key differences between the economic growth and the economical development. Then after that, I'm going to give you practical examples because I like practicality, just as usually doing all my episodes. I like practical examples. The third point, it will be on the economic development examples. So the first one will be based on the economic growth examples. Then after that, I'm going to separate them in two sections. Then economic development examples. After that, I'm going to give a summary because this is just a short episode, a short video. So just removing the misconceptions really between the economic growth and economical development, the misunderstanding which many people have. So they think growth and the development are the same thing. In this case, I'm going to show they are not the same, despite sounding the same, being like a similar. So in the first case, in the case of economic growth, it is based on the GDP. I've done the video on GDP, just the gross domestic product. It is also based on the GNP, the gross national product as well. It is based on the per capita income, which is just the income earned per individual in a nation or in the country. The per capita income also is just the average income. Like you can do the average. So it's like you add up, then you get the average. You simply divide by 2. That's all about averaging. Then the economic growth is simply based on the quantity. Economical development, however, it is based on the quality of lives of people within the country. In the case of economic development, actually, they're looking on the HDI, which simply means the Human Development Index. That's why I said it is more based on the quality and not the quantity. The economic growth, simply looking at the quantity and not the quality of lives. So are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? That in band, and let's begin our continuous episode on the economics. So while the terms economic growth and economic development are often used interchangeably, meaning the same, most the mistake which many people do really, misunderstanding, they refer to different aspects of a nation's progress. So first of all, the definition of economic growth, it simply refers to an increase in a country's output of goods and services, not the input, but the output. In the other case, GDP, the gross domestic product. Gross is like the output, typically measured by the gross domestic product, GDP in short, or the gross national product, GNP. So it is a quantitative measures focusing on the rise in the economic output, simply based on the quality, the quantity measure focusing on the rise of an economic output within the nation. The second one is economic development, giving definitions just to clear the misunderstandings. So in the case of economic development, on the other hand, it is a qualitative in the case of quality, measure that comprises not only economic growth, but also improvements in the overall well-being and quality of life of the population within the nation. So it includes factors such as poverty reduction, education, healthcare, and income equality. So in the case of economic development, they're focusing on the poverty reduction in the nation, education, healthcare, and all the income equality. In the case of income equality, it's all about the rich and the poor. So trying to see if there's a big gap between the rich and the poor. Like we have millionaires, trillionaires, billionaires, and you have the poor people, homeless people, things like that. That means there's all a big gap between the poor and the rich. There's the economic equality. So we're going to look at the first one, the key differences between economic growth and economic development. So just do difference one by one. So I'll start with economic growth. So it is quantitative. In this case, it focuses on the increase in the real output, income, or the GDP, the gross domestic product. Now I'm going to the economic development. It is qualitative. So in the case of quality, focuses on the improving living standards of the population, reducing poverty, and improving education and healthcare as well. It's all about education and healthcare in the case of economic development. Then we go again on the economic growth. It is narrow focus, so primarily concerned with increasing nation income. On the economic development, it is broader focus. Like take a big aspect, taking like a big view or most essential things in the nation, like including economic, social and institutional implementations as well. In this case, simply based on the socioeconomic, the overall socioeconomic, social and economic aspect in the nation. The third key feature of or differences between economic growth and economic development, in the case of economic growth, it is short-term impact. So it can be achieved quickly through policies that boost output, because the economic growth is simply based on the output, the GDP. So in this case, because we're talking about the policies, it's all about the fiscal policies, which are based on the revenue, including expenses or the government expenditures, in the case of trying to improve the economy within the country. So there is the economic growth is short-term. Economic development, however, it is long-term impact. So involve sustained and inclusive changes that take place within the nation. And the third one is like measured by, in the case of economic growth, it is measured by GDP, the gross domestic product, the GNP, the gross national product, and per capita income. In the case of per capita income, just the income earned by individual or per individual within the nation. The development, it is measured by Human Development Index, the HDI, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Literacy rate, like education, there is a literacy rate, life expectancy as well, life expectancy, and poverty rates. Those are the things which economic development looking at: the literacy rates, life expectancy, and poverty rates in the nation. So economic growth may not improve quality of life. Even GDP might be high, but that does not mean the quality of life has been improved within the nation. So growth can occur without necessarily improving living standards in the case of economic growth. In the case of economic development, however, it directly improves quality of life, because the development is based on the quality. The growth, economic growth, is based on the quantity, not the quality of life. So economic development enhances human welfare and socioeconomic conditions. The socioeconomics which we're talking about there, like economic, social, and institutional improvements. The last point on the key differences between economic growth, so it is like the economic growth does not address income inequality between the rich and the poor. It just looks the overall, the gross domestic product within the country, the GDP. So it ignores the poor and the rich, and even though we have the really GDP, and we have another one which is not really the real GDP, takes inflation into account, the rise of prices not given in a given specific time or over time. So in the case of economic growth, it doesn't address income inequality. So growth might only benefit a small portion of the rich people of the population, or just rich people in this case. In the case of economic development, it focuses on equitable distribution. Development seeks to reduce inequality and improve access to resources. So in this case, the economic development, it focuses between the poor and the rich and try to remove the inequality between them. Now we're going to touch on the practical examples. First of all, I said I'm going to divide them into two sections. So we're going to look at economic growth examples. So the first one is like China. So people, China, Trump like China. So in the case of China, let's say 1990s to 2020s, the development of China. That's when they started, 1990s. So in the case of China, its GDP grew at an increasing, impressive rate of 8 to 10% annually, due to rapid industrialization, infrastructure, development, and foreign investment. Those are the key things which made the GDP of China grow from 8 to 10% annually per year. So they invested, they put too much emphasis on industrialization, infrastructure development, and foreign investment. In the case of infrastructure, it's all like building roads, hospitals, educations as well, schools, and hospitals simply based on the healthcare. So this was reflected in its rising status as global economic power. However, this growth was accompanied by significant environmental degradation and income inequality, highlighting that economic growth alone does not always equate to overall development. In this case, the growing or the growth of GDP does not mean the overall development within the nation or the country. And here we have the environmental degradation, in the case of global warming, and the income inequality. So in the China today, people still think this pure socialism or communism. But since you have, so in the case of China, since we have income inequality, it simply means we have no billionaires and some people are poor. And when we have billionaires, that means there's a touch of capitalism, because millionaire, billionaire, and trillionaires, there's a product of capitalism, the inequality between the poor and the rich people. That means you have Jack Ma in China as a billionaire, or some of previous billionaires as well. It's not only Jack Ma. Jack Ma is a famous one. We have many billionaires in China. Maybe they're just billionaire, quote unquote. So with the second example, it's based on India as well, in the case of economic growth. So the 2000s and the 2020s as well, in the case of India. So India experienced rapid GDP growth due to a booming technology sector. So they invested too much in the tech sector, increased foreign investment as well, and urbanization. In the case of urbanization, like towns and cities and things like that, the country became one of the fastest growing economies in the world. In the case of India. The second one, still many regions, especially like rural areas, did not experience a proportional improvement in the quality of life, indicating a gap between growth and development. So those are like the examples in the case of economic growth. So it's simply the rise of GDP does not mean the overall improvement or living standard of the population within the country. In the case of China, in the case of India as well, we still have like rural places or people living in the bad conditions or environmental degradation. So the third part, we're going to look at the economic development examples, the second section. So the first one, we have like South Korea, not North Korea. This is South Korea. So we have two Koreas, the North and the South. The North one, we have Kim Jong-un. But in the South, we have all of them have Kim. Those the Southern names. So in the case of South Korea, let's say from 1960s and the present day, because they're still doing better even today, the economy, the GDP, the economic development, and the economic growth. So in this case, economic development, we're going to look at South Korea as number one. So it experienced both economic growth and development. So after the Korean War, it underwent like rapid industrialization and achieved high level of GDP growth in the case of South Korea. Along with that, South Korea invested heavily like in education, healthcare, and infrastructure as well. So educating its population, looking after their healthcare, maybe free healthcare, or majority of the people have access to healthcare, good quality, and infrastructure like roads, schools, and healthcare simply means hospital. That's all about government really. Usually takes care of all of those things, infrastructure, building. It's all about housing really. So today it boasts like a high human development index, the HDI, high human development index. So it boasts a high human development index, low poverty rates as well, and universal healthcare in the case of South Korea, showcasing that it is its development strategy was well rounded. So the second one is we're going to Africa as well, Botswana. In the case of economic development, Botswana as well, like in the post-1960s, so 1966, that's when I think they gained their independence. So Botswana experienced like both a sustained economic growth and significant human development as well, in the case of HDI, Human Development Index. So after gaining independence, it invested wisely in its diamond industry and infrastructure while also focusing on reducing poverty. That is Botswana, improving healthcare, and raising literacy rates. In the case of literacy, like trying to educate more population, really more people, citizens within the country. So if you have more educated citizens, you're going to improve the economy growth, the economic development as well. So as a result, in the case of that, Botswana's GDP grew up steadily, not just only rapidly, but steadily, slow, taking good pace. So, and it is considered one of Africa's success stories in terms of both growth and development. So there's the confusion or misunderstanding which many people do. Once you might have a good GDP in your country, you have trillions, millions of billions of euros or dollars or whatever currency you're using in your country. The GDP is good, the government are doing good, the politicians are doing good, but the lives of majority of people, the citizens, they still live in poverty despite having a high GDP on paper or high GDP in the treasury or the feds or the central banks or the government having high GDP On the television, here we have high GDP, high gross domestic product, we have good gross national product, or the per capita is good, the average is good, but they're leaving out the Human Development Index, which means the economic development is not focused, they're just putting more emphasis on the economic growth of the country without considering between the gap between the rich people and the poor. So what can we say, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion about the economic growth and economic development? Did I clear all the misunderstandings, or you still have some of them really? So wait for the summary, the conclusion. So economic growth is about increasing wealth, which simply means GDP, the gross domestic product, while economic development is about improving people's lives, so the living standard of the people, and ensuring that the benefits of growth are distributed fairly across society. In the case of fairness, it's all the gap between the rich and the poor. So growth can occur without development, but development almost always requires growth to sustain improvements in the quality of life. So in this case, we're not looking at the quantity, we have to focus on the quality. The quality is based on the economic development. So ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and keep sharing the video to reach more people as well, or to clear more misunderstandings. If you found the video useful, keep the thumb up and the comments as well. Thanks so much for watching.